Today's daf yomi is Sanhedrin daf Chafei, Sanhedrin 25. This is daf yomi for Shabbos Kodesh, recorded in advance, and we will dedicate the daf for Shemir for the Chayalim, and all for the Shmuyim, and Yeshua for Am Yisrael, and this Eis Tzara. Let's start at the Mishnah on the bottom of Chaptal and Beis. The Mishnah says, Elohein Hapsulin. These are those who are disqualified to be a judge or a witness. Hamasachik Pekovia. Somebody who plays with dice. Malva beribis, somebody who lends money at interest. Mafricha yonim, somebody who is a pigeon racer. Vesochre shvius, somebody who engages in selling the sabbatical fruits. And Rashi says the problem is that all these people are a little bit like robbers. And the Torah says a robber is not allowed to be a witness, and for sure not a judge, because they're called wicked. And Rabbi Shimon, at first they said anybody who just gathers the sabbatical fruits is prohibited. And once the government started forcing them to gather in the fruits, they started calling them the merchants, those who sell the sabbatical merchandise. Rabbi Yehuda says, Amasai, when do we say that they are disqualified? When this is their only profession. And therefore, Rashi explains, since they're not engaged in the betterment of the world, therefore they're disqualified as a witness. But if they have a different profession, it's kosher, because he says that it's not a form of theft, it's just that they're not doing anything to better the world. So the Gemara says, what's the problem with somebody who's a gambler? It's an asmachta. What's an asmachta? Asmachta is where the person enters into the relationship thinking that they're going to get the better of the deal. We're on the bottom of Chaftal and Beis, bottom of 24b. The person's entering into the relationship thinking that they're going to get something, and then they didn't realize when they were entering into it that this is what would happen. As Rashi cites the Gemara in Bamitzia, he says, if I leave this fallow and I don't work it, I'll pay you from the best of the property. So he didn't think he would leave the field fallow. Or if he gave this document to a third party and he thought that the third party would not collect it. So therefore, in all these cases, asmachta is not binding. And so therefore the person isn't really committing to pay this money. And so therefore the dice player doesn't really want to pay the other person the money. So if you take his money, it's a form of theft. Now asmachta l'kanya, therefore it's a form of theft, so you're like a thief. So that's why you're disqualified. Rav Shesha says, Koki agavna lav asmachta. All these cases are not asmachta, because the asmachta is where it's up to you and you think it's going to happen. But in these cases, when he goes into it, he knows there's a level of chance. Therefore, Rav Shesha says these cases are not asmachta. But because he's not engaged in the betterment of the world, therefore he's disqualified. My benai, what's the difference? He can benai, the distinction between two answers. The Gamar Amnusa Achrisa, where he has a different profession. Mar says, but wait 1 second. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Emasai Bizman She Einlan Umnes Elahu Al Yeshan Umnes Shalom Ksherim. So Alma Taimid Masnisin Mishum Yeshuva Shalom. So Rabbi Yehuda says, wait 1 second. When the Gemara raises a question, the Gemara is going to bring a proof for Rav Sheshes. Says these are cases are not a smalta. Because they're not a pure asmachta, because the asmachta is where you think for sure it's going to happen. But rather, these cases, they're disqualified because they're not engaged in this betterment of the world. And indeed, Rabbi Yehuda says, when is this the case? When they have no other profession. So we see from here that the reason of the Mishnah is because of Yeshuva Shel Olam. The reason why the dice player is disqualified is because he's not engaged in the betterment of the world, just like Rav Shesha said. So Kasha Rami Barchama, V'chitem Apliga Rabbanan Alei the Rabbi Yehuda, and we would say the Rabbanan argue with Rabbi Yehuda, and the Rabbanan are of the position that he's disqualified because it's in a smach. The Rabbanan Shmuel Levi, Koma Alkam Sham Rabbi Yehuda Emasai Ubameh, Enu El Farish the Rechamim. The Rabbi Yehuda is not arguing with the Chachamim; he's explaining them. So therefore, the law is like Rav Sheish. It's a question on Rami Barchama. It says Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says Amos Farish Uba Melachok, but everybody's in a position to Kuyama Amos Farishu. So therefore, so clearly Rabbi Yehuda is just explaining the Rabbanan. And Gemara says Gavra Kam Ramis. You're going to ask a question from Rabbi Shmuel Levi on Rami Barchama. Rami Barchama says that Amos Rabbi Yehuda is coming to argue. And Rabbi Yehuda says it's Yishuv Shalom, and the Chachamim say it's a Mesmachta. Marasavar Pligi, Marasavar will Pligi. That Rabbi Barchama's other position that they're arguing, and Rabbi Shmuel Levi says that Rabbi Yehuda is not arguing. So then the Gemara says, Tanya, the Gemara says, 1 second. Gemara says, but we have a question. Below Pligi, are they not arguing? Tanya. Bain Sheish Alum Nisho, Bain Sheilum Nusu. That we have a brisa that says he's disqualified whether he has another profession or not. So clearly they're arguing. Even where he has another profession, he's disqualified. Ella is that possible? So he's disqualified. The Gemara says, "Ahi Rabbi Yehuda mishum Rabbi Tarfon." Now that's Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Tarfon, meaning to say that's Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Tarfon. Meaning to say, well, first we'll cite the Bryce and we'll read the Rashi. Because we say the Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Tarfon Ola Mein Echa Mehin Nazar Lefi Shalonas Naziros El Afla. Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Rabbi Tarfon. None of them are Nazir because the Naziros was only given to a clear statement. So let's look at the Rashi. Rashi will explain what this means. According to the Gemara's conclusion, that word the Amasai is really to explain, and the Rabbanan and the Masnisi are not arguing, and our Bryce. So this Bryce, so it says whether he has another profession or whether he doesn't have another profession, he's going to be disqualified. That is, there the reason is because of a smachta. That's Rabbi Yehuda himself said in the name of Rabbi Tarfon, and that argues with the Rabbanan of the Mishnah, because the Rabbanan of the Mishnah are saying because of Yishuv Shalom, and the Bryce of Rabbi Yehuda, and in the Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda is explaining the Rabbanan, and here he's explaining Rabbi Tarfon. And how do we know what Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Tarfon? Because we have a statement that Shnayim Sheyoshin. Let's say there were two people who are sitting, and one passes by and he says, this person who passes by is a Nazirite. He says, and the other one says he's not a Nazirite. And the other one says, I'm a Nazirite if Hareini Nazir im Kamoso, Hu Shehu Nazir. And he says, I'm a Nazirite if this person passing by is a Nazirite. And the other one says, I'm a Nazirite if he's not a Nazirite. And both of them are intending to become Nazirite. And then one of them is proved to be right. So Rabbi Tarfon says neither one of them is a Nazir, because he said his words out of a doubt from the beginning. And in order to be a Nazirite, there needs to be a clear statement. So we see from here that according to Rabbi Tarfon, if you make your conditional dependent on something that's not in your hands, it will be an asmachta. And so therefore, and we don't say that you make the acquisition. So in this case, it would not be a valid acquisition. So meaning to say, we see from here that like the case of Mesachi L'Kuvia, if you make a statement dependent upon a factor beyond your control, it's an asmachta. And so therefore, Rabbi Shmuel Levi and Rabbi Yochanan could argue that the brisa which follows that the brisa which says that you're disqualified because it's an asmachta, that follows the position of Rabbi Tarfon. But in our Mishnah, they say that just gambling is not an asmachta. Amar Malva B'Rivis, if you lend money and interest, you're disqualified. Amar Rava, Rava says not if you lend money and interest, but if you borrow money and interest, you're disqualified to be a witness. Gemara says, but our Mishnah says lending and interest. So the Gemara says, milva haba beribis means to say a loan that comes with interest, meaning to say both parties, both the lender and the borrower, did disqualified. Bar benitus asidu be tre sadi. So bar benitus, there was two witnesses who testified against him. Hadamar kamedi di ozif beribita. One says, in front of me, he lent money in interest. V'chadamar di usfi beribita. He said, he lent me money on interest. So Basla Rava bar benitus. So Rava disqualified Barbanitus. The Gemara says, but why? Rava is the one who said that if you borrow money at interest, you're going to be disqualified. So therefore, Ravle Rasha, Torah Amra, I'll touch this Russia aid. So how is Rava disqualifying this person? Because this person's saying he lent me money on interest. And so therefore, he himself is disqualified. So how is he testifying that this other person to disqualify him? The Gemara says, Rava Tameh, Rava follows his logic. The Amar Rava Adam Karvetel Atzmo, a person is considered a relative to himself, meaning to say he's related to himself. The Ein Adam Mesim Atzmo Rasha, and therefore he can't disqualify himself by saying he's a Rasha. So since therefore he is believed to testify about the other person, but not about himself, and so therefore against himself the testimony was not accepted, but it was accepted about Bar Bintos because we split his testimony. Mara says the following story: there was a butcher who discovered that he was selling non-kosher meat. So Rav Nachman disqualified him from being a butcher, and he disqualified him as a witness. So although Rabbi Mazia V'Tufri, the butcher went and grew his hair long and his fingernails long as a sign of doing tshuva. Savar of Nachman Achshure. Rav Nachman said, okay, maybe we'll put him back in. Amay Rava, Dilma Yarume Kamaraim. Kamarim, maybe he's just tricking us. Elamai Takante, so what can we do? How can you do tshuva? And the Mar says, Ravidi Maravan, Amarabi Maravan, Hachashad al Treifos Elo Takana Chiel Hamakom Shema Kirnaso. The person is suspected about selling non-kosher food, he has to go to a place where they don't recognize him. Yachzir Aveda Bedavar Chashov, Oshayotzi Treifi. You have to go and either return a lost object, which is worth a lot of money, and then clearly we see he doesn't have this desire for money, or actually have to on his own demonstrate that he thinks that something is not kosher. What are these mafricha yonim? Hacha targuma. So here they explained it in Babylon. Whether whose pigeon will come in first? Pigeon racers. It means he knows how to lure the other doves from one owner to another, and that's a type of theft because they're not technically owned. According to the first approach, who says that it's a pigeon racer, why doesn't he say it's a pigeon person who like lures or traps the other person's pigeons? He said, what's the reason? He says, my time. So he says, the idea of taking the other person's pigeons is not real theft, it's just darkei b'shalom. Meaning to say, because we learned in the Bryce and Chulin that it's not actual theft, it's theft darkei shalom. It's just not going to bring the way of peace, but it's not actual theft. Because the owner of the coop does not really own them, because they come and go on their own. So it's not a real theft. On the one who says that it's the person who lures the pigeons, why doesn't he accept the approach if my pigeon comes before yours, a pigeon racer? Gemara explains, says, well, that's dice. That's the same thing as gambling. So Gemara says, no, there's a distinction. Either Tana Tol B'das Asma or Tana Tol B'das Yona. The first it says one who relies upon himself, meaning to say that he thinks he's extra skilled as a dice player, and then it relies on the skill of the pigeon racer, meaning to say that you don't know, it's somebody else. So therefore, that's not dependent upon him. With Tzricha, and we need both cases. Ditan Tol B'das Asma, we say, if we just said relying upon himself, because we would say that that's an Esmachta. Hasamudul Gamar Mikne. The reason why he's disqualified, there wasn't a formal kinyan there. Ta'amar Kadam Benafshi the Adana Tfei, he says, Kim Benafshi the Adana Tfei. I know how to roll the dice better. Aval Tola B'das Yono, but if he says it's up to the pigeons, maybe he wouldn't say it there. He says, I'm better at the pigeon racing because I'm going to bang the boards together and my pigeon is going to hear it and she'll know that that she's supposed to go faster. So therefore the case is different. So therefore the Gemara is going to ask the question, what's a dice player? Somebody who plays with fisfisin. What is fisfisin? Rashi says these are broken pieces of wood. So not only broken pieces of wood, even peels of nuts and pomegranates and the Emasai Chazarasan, and when are the people considered to have done Shubha? Yishabru is Pispasem, Vyachru Ben Chazar Gemara. When they break up the wooden pieces and they do a complete Shubha. Gemara says, Dafil B'chinam Lo Abdi? They can't even play for free? Dafil B'chinam Lo Abdi. They can't even play for free. Dafil B'chinam Malva Baribis. When does the lender and interest do tshuva? When they rip up their contract and they have a complete change. And the Gemara says, they don't even lend an interest to a non-Jew. This one causes the pigeons to fight. Even the other animals they cause to fight. When they break up their boards that cause them to run away. And so and even the wilderness they don't do it. And so therefore this is going to be approved. You can interpret this brisa either to refer to betting on pigeons or luring them away. They don't even do it in the midbar. That refers to the second part. These are first people who engage in selling the merchandise of Shvias. And when do they return? When another sabbatical year comes and they don't do anything. Not only is it a repentance of words, but even a repentance of money. It gives away his money to the poor. Mara says, it says that the pigeon mafricha yonim has to do with an animal. Makes sense if you say that it's a pigeon racer. because that's like a cow racer or a bull racer and a pigeon racer. According to say, it's a decoy that you trick the pigeons to follow you. Behemoth basachi is that an animal that doesn't work if it's a domesticated animal. The Gemara says in Bishor Bar. Yes, it's done with a wild animal. Of a man the Amr Shor Bar Min Behemu, and the one who says it's a type of domesticated animal, the Tanan Shor Bar Behemu, Rabbi Yossi Omer Min Chaya. Okay. Gemara says Tana Sifo Ein Agazlanim V'Chamsanin. All who else is disqualified to be a witness or a judge? Also the robbers and the Chamsanim. The Chamsanin is he pays the money, but he forces the guy to sell it to him. Gazal and Dioraisi, Gemara says a robbery is a biblical prohibition. Gemara says, now we're talking about a case of where he found an object that belongs to a person who doesn't have agency, a chayra shota or a minor. At first, they thought it wasn't common, and so therefore, we don't have to declare it. Or maybe it's not real theft, it's just darkei shalom. Keeping the chazah so from the mono the kashakli pasur rabbanim. In the end, they saw that he was taking the money, so they disqualified. Chamsana, and what are chamsanin? Hikarasavar demei kayahiv akrai ba'amahu. At first, they thought he's not prohibited because he's giving the money, and it's just once in a while. He just needs that object. But given the chazak kachatvi, but they saw he's grabbing it because the rabbis made a decree. Tana odo sifin alein haroan hagabayim hamochsan. And they also said prohibited are the shepherds, the gabayin, and the tax collectors. Roim, the shepherds, may kara savar akrai ba'amu. At first, they thought that they are just grazing. Given the kachazu, the kamikavnu, v'shadol chatchil, gazu b'rabbanan. Once they saw that they were intentionally doing this, the rabbis made a decree. The tax collectors may cover server my the kitzlu kashakli that they only collected the bare minimum that they had to do. Given the cause of the kashakli yisera passing, so they're getting more, they disqualified them. When they say the shepherds are disqualified, it doesn't matter if it's a behema daka, a large animal, or a behema gas, or a smaller animal. Gemara says, "Mi amar Rava hachi." That's Rava really says. Amar Rava Rava behema daka bar tzrop sulam b'chutz la'aretz k'sher. And he says, the shepherds of small animals are disqualified in Israel. Behema gas, I feel be'aretz k'sher, but the large animals, even in the land of Israel, are kosher. So Rava really says that if you're grazing cows, it's okay. That was only stated with respect to raising them. But if you're grazing them in other people's fields, it's a problem. It says, I trust the three shepherds to be my judges. My love will aid us. Would that be with respect to witnesses? Gemara says no. Udina means for a judgment. And Dekanami, the Ketani Shlosha Bakar, Vila Ada Shlosha. Why would you need three for a witness? Our Myladina, Mayer Shlosha Bakar, Kobe Tosa the Lugami Dina Nami. Anyone who's not studied the law or is disqualified. So Hachkamar, Fila Hani do Shchichi Beyishiv, even those who are not commonly found cannot be brought back. And I'm Rav Yehuda, Stamro Apostle, Stam Gabbai Kosher. Basic shepherd is disqualified, a basic tax collector is kosher. And the Gemara tells us, Avua de Rabbi Zera Avad Gabi Yusa Tleiser Shanim. Rabbi Zera's father was a tax collector for 13 years. Kavi Asi Reish Naromat. So when the head of the town would come, Kiavi Chazi Rabbanon, if Rabbi Zera's father would see the rabbis, Amru Lechami Bo B'Chaderach, they go hide. Kiavi Chazi Anshe de Masa Amar, when would see the townspeople would say to them, Reish Nahara also Masa, the mayor's coming. And today he slaughtered the father in the presence of the son, and the son in the presence of the father. Meaning to say, he's going to be asking for a high tax. Umigzu koyama, and everybody would go hiding. Kiasi Amroi, when the head of the town would show up, he would say, Miman Bai, Rabbi Zera's father would say, who should I ask the money for? And when Rabbi Zera's father was dying, he said, take this 13 mug that I wrapped in my handkerchief, give it back to this person, because I took them from taxes, but in the end, they didn't need it. Okay, that's today's daf, a beautiful daf. I'll stop here. I'll go over it again, God willing, on Shabbos. Yashakoah.